As presidential elections go, it was a complete mess. Chaotic, full of scandal, fake news, and toxic partisanship, culminating in a major upset and a dramatic aftermath as votes were counted. So pretty much par for the course, right? Welcome to American Esoterica. If history class gives you the election day, this is the I voted sticker. The essential stuff in between. The personalities, events, and other ephemera that shape our history and culture. I'm Brian Powers. If you have any lingering respect for our founding fathers and early presidents, you might want to turn back now. It's about to get really ugly, and there's no walking away clean from this. No matter how much it may have been sanitized throughout history, and sanitized it has been, particularly by the main players involved, the election of 1800 was a sign of the chaos to come. It exposed serious flaws in the system designed by the very participants at issue. And it was not only a dirty street brawl of a campaign, it sullied the very notion that we could govern ourselves as civilized individuals. But let's go back a little further to the root of the issue. It's 1796, and George Washington has done something particularly noble that helps our fledgling government take wing. He announces that he will not seek the presidency again. He was the clear consensus choice to lead the country through 2 election cycles, and there were plenty among the new countrymen who would have been happy anointing him president for life. His successor was always going to have unreasonably big shoes to fill, but John Adams did his best, with his friend Thomas Jefferson by his side as vice president. Kind of. They were friends, but they didn't run on a ticket together in 1796. They actually ran against each other, and the Constitution at the time awarded the vice presidency to the second-place finisher. It was also the very first partisan race. The factions that Washington had warned about in his farewell address were already extant, and those early loose coalitions of like-minded politicos kicked off the whole party system. There was low public interest in the election, but one thing stood out: attacks on Jefferson from an anonymous writer known as Phocion, who dragged Jefferson through the mud on topics ranging from his temperament to his suspected affairs with his enslaved women through letters printed in a Federalist newspaper. Jefferson was even accused of running away from British troops during the Revolution. Phocion also praised Adams at every opportunity, and these sentiments helped turn the tide of the election in favor of Adams, though the margins were fairly narrow. Adams now had the unenviable task of standing in Washington's presidential shadow, and he chose poorly. Getting into a slap fight with France, passing the Alien and Sedition Acts, stifling dissent. His administration faced an uphill battle to gain a second term already, but that wasn't enough for some people apparently. Somebody wanted Adams to lose, and lose big. Somebody needed a Phocion of his own. Enter James Callender. The muckraking Scotsman had already been chased out of Britain in 1793 on charges of sedition, and he had found himself a home in Philadelphia, in a country with a free press. He wasted little time in peddling the scandal of the day, often bankrolled by a secret benefactor. He lashed out at any politician that struck his fancy. Sacred political cows be damned, such as this screed in the Philadelphia Aurora General Advertiser in 1796. If ever a nation was debauched by a man, the American nation has been debauched by Washington. If ever a nation has suffered from the improper influence of a man, the American nation has been deceived by Washington. Let his conduct then be an example to future ages. Let it serve to be a warning that no man may be an idol, and that a people may confide in themselves rather than in an individual. When his secret benefactor wanted Hamilton taken down, Callender willingly obliged, digging up very real dirt on Hamilton's affair for a pamphlet in 1796. The factual scandalous bits were mixed in with far more serious accusations of misappropriation of public funds. which prompted Hamilton to draft the Reynolds pamphlet, to confess to the affair and to provide a defense against the other accusations. It was the very first American major political sex scandal, and it was all from the pen of James Callender. In his defense, we wouldn't have most of the second act of Hamilton without him, so, yay for that. The Federalists were outraged, and their partisan newspaper called out Callender directly. In the name of justice and honor, how long are we to tolerate this scum of party filth and beggarly corruption, worked into a form somewhat like a man, to go thus with impunity? To escape their wrath, Callender fled to Virginia to hide the day before the Alien and Sedition Acts became law. Seeing the power of Callender's pen, however, his secret patron set his sights on Adams in the election of 1800, where he would once again face off against Jefferson. And this is where Callender produced his most effective pamphlet. Called The Prospect Before Us, Callender let fully loose, giving Adams both barrels. The most famous passage of the lengthy pamphlet impugns Adams's gender. Ye will judge without regard to the prattle of a president, the prattle of that strange compound of ignorance and ferocity, of deceit and weakness, without regard to that hideous hermaphroditical character, which has neither the force and firmness of a man, nor the gentleness and sensibility of a woman. Adams and the Federalists were outraged, and Callender was immediately locked up under the Sedition Act. The pamphlet did the trick. Adams lost the presidency, but Jefferson didn't win it outright. See, back then, each member of the Electoral College cast 2 votes, and running mates would appear on the ballot alongside the main office seekers. That's how Adams wound up with Jefferson as the VP. The votes made no distinction between the top 2 spots. You get the most, you win the top spot. You come in second, you're the VP. What if you tied? Because the members of the Electoral College did their partisan duty and voted once for their party's presidential candidate and once for their vice presidential candidate. It seems stupidly obvious now, but apparently it wasn't so clear to the framers just over a decade earlier that they had built a system doomed to result in deadlock. In the event of a tie, the election then went to the House of Representatives, where the clear presidential candidate, Thomas Jefferson, was easily selected after only 36 rounds of voting. Aaron Burr, his running mate, decided to sit back and see how it played out, rather than put a thumb on the scale to ensure Jefferson won the runoff. The prospect of accidentally becoming President Burr didn't sound so bad to the man who would one day attempt to become King of Mexico, apparently. It was only when Alexander Hamilton, of all people, stepped in and switched his vote to Jefferson that the outcome crystallized. It wasn't known during his lifetime, but it was Alexander Hamilton who had bedeviled Jefferson as the writer Phocion. And it was Thomas Jefferson who had quietly bankrolled James Callender to slander Jefferson's friend and rival, John Adams. At least the chaotic election of 1800 was finally over, but the consequences would ripple onward and outward. Callender and others jailed under the Sedition Act received a pardon from Jefferson, but Callender wanted more. He asked Jefferson for an appointment to be Postmaster General in Richmond, but the president instead used his secretary, a man by the name of Meriwether Lewis, to swat at Callender with $50 to go away. Having achieved the presidency, Jefferson had no use for a man like Callender and wanted no association. And Callender took that personally. He switched his long-held partisan affiliation to go to work for the Federalist paper in Richmond, and he spent from then on waging war on Jefferson in print. First, he published the details about how Jefferson had bankrolled his attacks on Jefferson's foes. Jefferson responded with piteous condescension, claiming that Callender had misconstrued his charitable efforts toward the poor, deluded man. That was it for Callender, the final straw. He finally committed to print what had long been rumored or merely hinted at in other far more polite letters, that Jefferson had carried on a sexual relationship with Sally Hemings, an enslaved woman in Monticello, and that she had borne several of his children. It was this, the documentation of this relationship in the strongest possible public terms, that gave historians cause to investigate and determine the truth of the revelations. Had Thomas Jefferson not lied about his association with Callender, we may never have known. The Electoral College got a pretty good revamp in 1804 through the 12th Amendment to keep a repeat of 1800 from happening, separating the ballots for the top two offices. Jefferson chose to go with somebody not actively hoping to usurp his office at the first accidental opportunity for his second term, while Aaron Burr chose to shoot Hamilton and commit some light treason. Jefferson didn't publicly respond to the Hemming story, and John Adams kept quiet about all of it, although his wife Abigail gave Jefferson plenty of hell over it, despite his protestations. Both men later repaired their friendship and set about the task of creating what they saw as the proper way to view the history of the founding of the United States, both working to adjust their legacies for the positive. A destitute James Callender drunkenly drowned in 3 feet of water in the James River in 1803. In retrospect, it was probably the most fitting end for our nation's first firebrand political pundit. This has been American Esoterica. All sounds were made by me, Brian Powers. Did I get it wrong? Did I get it right? Just want to speculate if James Callender is related to Marie Callender and her delicious pies? Drop me a note. The address is yell@americanesoterica.com. More information on this show and its episodes can be found at americanesoterica.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless America.